is, we've been doing hydrocarbon gas drilling in New York State for, 100, 150 years. Most of us didn't know that. I suppose I didn't know that. All over upstate New York, there are a whole lot of gas drills. What makes this so different is that, for the first 150 years of gas drilling, people just, drilled straight down and took whatever gas came up. What they are now doing, which has, until very recently, had never been done, is drilling down a mile, which is mind-boggling enough, but then they make a turn and go horizontal for God knows how far, and then pump this high-pressure, low-friction, bacteria-killing and everything else killing water in to break up the rock. And we really have very little experience with this on a historical scale. The people from the gas industry came and told us how, the water that goes into the, ground a mile down and, maybe half a mile horizontal, don't worry, that won't get anywhere near the water supply. But how do they know that? And the answer is they don't really know that. We haven't been doing this for all that long. If it turns out 20 years from now that it takes 20 years for it to migrate into our water supply, we don't know that today. One of the questions raised was, how do we get, after the gas gets brought up, how does it get to our stoves or the next generation automobile engines? And of course, until and unless somebody tries to get us to build a pipeline, it gets trucked out. That's a lot of trucks, and trucks pollute. And we asked the spokespeople for the gas industry about that, and they said, well, we would select routes that weren't in, populated areas, and we would try to avoid going past schools. And I said, what planet are you on? I mean, in upstate New York, every highway goes through a populated community. Every highway in upstate New York goes past schools. I mean, yeah, there aren't a whole lot of people living right next to the thruway, but the drilling sites aren't right next to the thruway. You're gonna have to go along little county roads and whatnot to get to the thruway. And you can't go on those roads and not go past farmhouses and little towns and schoolhouses and schoolyards. And they came about as close as I've ever heard a lobbyist get to basically going, oh, we'll have to get back to you on that. And so the hazard here is very real. It's interesting that the Cuomo administration a few months back said, oh, we're not going to allow it anywhere near the New York City or the Syracuse watershed. To which I would say, first of all, add the word yet to that statement. But why? There's either a valid reason to not allow it near the watershed, or there is not a valid reason to prohibit it from the watershed area. If there is no valid reason, well, then somebody's going to go to court and say they allow hydrofracking over here, they have to allow it in the New York City watershed. Or there is a valid reason, namely, it's going to endanger the water supply. Well, all over the state, there are people, and I've done a study of this, all over the state, there are people who drink water. And they don't all get all of it shipped in nice plastic bottles, or at least they like to not have to do that. An awful lot of it comes out of the ground. And if there is a hazard to the New York City watershed, why isn't there a hazard to every household everywhere else in upstate New York that either gets their water out of a well in their backyard or from a municipal well. And if the Cuomo administration says, you know, what are we going to say? Yes, there was a hazard in the New York City watershed, but there was no hazard to your well. Well, how do you know that? Or, yeah, there is a hazard to your well, but, you know, you're only a small farm, you're not in New York City. Or supposing they say there is no hazard to your well, well, then the hydrofracking people are going to say, okay, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has said that hydrofracking isn't hazardous to water supplies away from the New York City watershed. We're going to go to court and win by taking the state's conclusion and applying it to the watershed, to the New York City watershed. So the fact that they are excluding it from the New York City watershed, to me, either means they had better exclude it from everybody else's watershed, or if they don't, somebody's going to go to court, and before you know it, they're going to be doing hydrofracking in our water supply. Either way, it's to my notion utterly unjustifiable, an utter violation of any notion of protecting public health. And you know, that's why the Environmental Conservation Committee reached out to me as chair of the Health Committee and said, we're going to do a hearing on this. We really think you should be doing it jointly with us. And I'm really glad that we did that. Because I think it really does strengthen the message that there is an awful lot of lives at stake here, an awful lot of public health at stake here, and we had all better do just about everything we can to keep this out of New York State. And at the federal level, it's probably a lot harder to keep it out of the other 49 states, but we can, because the politics in Washington makes Albany look like a civics textbook. And you can imagine what that takes. But we can do something about New York, and